Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. It's not all high salaries and luxury lifestyles. It can indeed be lonely at the top. Add a global pandemic to the mix, and it can result in some terrible personal and professional outcomes. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. In December 2020, deep into the pandemic, instances of executive loneliness had doubled to around 60%. That's according to Nick Jonsson, co-founder and MD of EGN Singapore. Based in Asia for more than 20 years, it was during his own particularly difficult period managing anxiety and depression that he decided to research his fellow executives to see who else might be going through similar mental health challenges. In fact, he wrote a book on his findings called Executive Loneliness, where he reveals some incredible results. But I begin by asking Nick what executive loneliness actually is.
Well, the old saying there goes like it's lonely at the top, and it's so true because the higher up the hierarchy you go, the lonelier it gets because there's less people that are sharing the same problem as you. And many times if you are an executive in organizations, you are paid to actually take on the additional burden to handle the stress, and you are also trying perhaps not to disclose the weaknesses you have and the challenges you are facing. So therefore, indeed, the saying still is right. It is lonelier the higher up you go.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about a certain level of stress. How common is executive stress?
Well, I spoke with one therapist who said that actually everyone is suffering from it, but most of them will not disclose it. They will keep it secret and silent for, as I mentioned, because they want to look like a strong, good leader rather than looking weak. So I would also say that it's at least in the vast majority, but yeah, actually call it a smiling depression. We're seeing all these smiling, successful business people, but behind the scene, it's a complete different picture. And it's the same if you think about celebrities or famous people also. And how often don't we see them falling and breaking, and only for us to find out, and we're all surprised, oh, did that person also suffer? And we had no idea.
Well, what are the symptoms of executive stress, and what should we be looking for?
Well, this is the thing, and the challenge here, Nicole, is that people are so good at hiding it because we do everything we can to paint this rosy, beautiful picture there on the Facebook and LinkedIn. We have the best pictures and we're showing that one-sided. So it is very hard. But what we need to look at and around us, for example, in our colleagues, our friends, our family members and so on, is if someone suddenly are changing the pattern. Let's say that they suddenly put on weight, they lose weight, or perhaps they stopping something which they've done for a long time. If they typically went for a jog after work, or if they used to cook a pasta every Wednesday night and suddenly they stopping that, or they isolating themselves, cutting themselves off. When you make perhaps appointments to go and see your friends on for a coffee on a Tuesday morning, they don't show up and they cancel in the last second. Those are all warning signs that something is just not right. And I should add also, there's also a lot of addictions here, a lot of gambling, overeating, drugs and alcohol, especially in the last 2 years of the pandemic that are taking place.
Well, yeah, you mentioned the pandemic. How much more has that impacted business owners over the last couple of years? What have been some of the results?
They have been hit hard, both senior executives and business owners, because if you're isolating at home, and that means that you're not sharing your problems. And here the challenge is, while we can connect on Zoom and other means online, you might not want to be so vulnerable. Maybe you don't go deep enough to really discuss what is there. We all perhaps prefer to sit with someone to face them when we share what is really bothering us. So that has been a major challenge. And I can also share that I'm a volunteer here in Singapore for suicide hotlines, and there's been a spike in the phone calls coming in there with 20% in the last 2 years. So I think that really is a testament that, yeah, it is challenging and people are suffering these days.
Can you tell us briefly about your own experience that you've had with anxiety and depression?
Yeah, I was laid off from two jobs in two different countries, unfortunate circumstances, and that made me very anxious. And I started not to feel so safe in my third job when I got that. And I isolated. I didn't share any of the challenges that I was facing. I tried to solve them all by myself. And it went so far that I really didn't feel part of the company anymore. So while everyone in the leadership team thought that I did a great job, I thought I was underperforming. So I went in and resigned, and they just couldn't understand why did I leave this role. But I had already made up my mind. I just didn't feel a part of it anymore. And that then led to many bad habits with me. I gained weight, I stopped exercising, I started to drink too much alcohol, and this in result led to a divorce. And there I was spiraling down into a full blown depression. Luckily, though, I once I hit bottom, I managed to find a way out, and that's why I'm grateful today to share my experience.
How did you find your way out?
I found my way out by asking for help, and I was grateful to be surrounded by some people who I could trust and who I could speak to at that stage. And I believe that is the game changer for someone who is stuck in it or who don't find a way out. But someone who find a way out is someone who actually managed to get help.
Mazars is an international audit, tax and advisory firm committed to helping clients confidently build and grow their businesses. Experience a new perspective with Mazars. Visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au. So when you were researching your book, what were some of the findings that stood out for you?
Well, the interesting part here, Nicole, is that when I surveyed the executives how they felt before the pandemic, 30% of them said that they're suffering from loneliness in their jobs. I then did the same survey with the same audience in December 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic, the numbers then had doubled to 59%. So that is a finding that really stand out. And in addition to this, 84% of the members also wouldn't talk to their company about their struggle. Just in addition to this, also 75% wouldn't seek professional help for it either. So that just means that the vast majority are suffering, feeling lonely, do not talk about it, and do not seek help for it.
What do you think some of the solutions are, whether it be from an organisational perspective or personally for executives or staff to seek solutions?
I believe that this is something that has to start at the top of an organization. You as a business leader need to be vulnerable, because if you don't share that you're also a human being and you also have your challenges, then no one will come to you and disclose that they also have a problem. So it is the responsibility of every business leader to be open and share more how they are feeling and open the door for others to share as well.
And it's probably also that safety factor too. I mean, there'd be a lot of people who would be scared to go to a CEO or to the board or to their management and say, I'm really unwell, I'm dealing with mental health concerns. There's a cost to that from a business perspective. You know, making people feel safe that you have that covered or not to worry, or that it's just as important as breaking your arm, would need to be a focus as well, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And the good thing here, though, is, Nicole, there's so many anonymous support organizations outside your company who you can turn to. You just can go to Google and look in what's around you and call these hotlines, and there will be help, and a lot on a volunteer basis as well, which doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And I just want to add also that there's one good thing here that has come out of the pandemic, and that is the fact that we can go in Zoom meetings. We can have perhaps even a session during your lunch break where you can lock your office door and go on a one-on-one counselor session. You don't have to these days therefore go and see them in their office where you might be worried that someone will see you. So that is a positive and some bright changes.
Yeah, and even a time saver too, that you may not have to take as much time off work, but you can slip it into your lunch hour. What are some of the strategies overall you think are required to overcome executive stress and avoid it if possible?
So that, Nicole, is actually what I wrote in my book. So in my book, I divided this up in 5 steps. And if I just talk them through very briefly here, the first step is by taking stock, almost like an inventory of yourself. So if you are a shop owner, you will do taking stock or inventory list a few times a year just to see where you're at. But how often do we actually stop and take stock for ourselves and write down the inventory for ourselves? So that was the first step. And the second step, once you have that inventory, you need to look at what are the things that I need to address here. And then it is about asking help. If you're not well, and if you gained weight or you picked up a bad addiction, then it is about asking help to address that. And then the third step then is getting into action and getting healthy and sorting that out so that you heal yourself internally. And then the fourth step, once you have healed internally, I believe that the best way is then to nurturing your relationship, because if you have not been well, most likely you've hurt people you love along the way. Perhaps you snapped at some colleagues, you sent an email which you didn't mean to, and perhaps you said something to your husband that you regret. And it's about then making amends and apology for this, so you repair the relationship so that you start to feel better about yourself. And then the fifth and the final step that I recommend is finding your purpose, really looking at the greater in the universe and do something that you're passionate about and perhaps giving something back. And that is what I found now with my own journey, that once I overcame my challenges, I now want to be of service in helping others to overcome. And when I do this on a daily basis, I'm feeling better myself, and I'm not being sucked back into the bad executive stress and the loneliness that I was in.
And Nick, can you tell us off the back of that, how is your life now? What are you doing these days?
I'm living life beyond my wildest dreams, I can almost say. I have remarried. I'm very happy married. And while I was working before and very insecure in my work, so I'm now a small business owner myself together with my wife, and our business is doing well. Basically, all the worries about financials and financial insecurity has left me. And yeah, I'm living a very good life, and I'm doing what I can one day at a time.
That was Nick Jonsson, co-founder and MD of EGN Singapore. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.